"Get out of this house, old woman. You've leeched off us long enough." The words sliced through me like broken glass. My own daughter-in-law, Tiffany, stood there with fire in her eyes, while my son, my Ethan, kept his gaze fixed on the floor. I waited for him to defend me, to say something, anything, but silence was all he gave. Hours earlier, I had opened my credit card statement and nearly collapsed. $53,000 gone overnight on jewelry and a trip to Bali. I had thought it was a mistake, but the smirk on Tiffany's face told me otherwise. I never imagined the people I loved most would treat me like a burden, a fool, a stranger in my own family. Yet here I was, my heart breaking in the very home I once built with love. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. My name is Linda Thompson. I am 67 years old, a retired school librarian, and a widow for more than a decade. My hair, now a soft shade of gray, is usually pinned into a neat bun, though by the end of the day, a few strands always slip free, framing a face more worn than I like to admit. My hazel eyes once sparkled whenever I looked at my only son, Ethan. People often told me my voice carried a calmness, a gentle rhythm that soothed restless children in the library and made every bedtime story feel like a promise of safety. After my husband passed away from a sudden heart attack, the world became unbearably quiet. The house felt too big, the nights too long. But Ethan kept me going. He was my anchor, my reason to keep breathing. I poured all my love and every bit of my strength into him. I skipped vacations, patched my old winter coat year after year, and sold my mother's jewelry to help pay his tuition. Later, when he married Tiffany, I gave up nearly all my retirement savings so they could buy their first home. I told myself, this is what family is for. This is love. I remember the day they moved into the house. The dining table I helped them choose gleamed under the light, its varnish fresh. I imagined family dinners filled with laughter, the kind of joy that would make my late husband proud. But reality was different. More often than not, I sat quietly at the far end of that table while Tiffany held court with her stories about boutique clients and fashion shows. Tiffany, 35, radiant, and impossible to ignore. She worked as a boutique manager, always arriving home in tailored dresses that shimmered even in the dull glow of the kitchen lights. Her dark hair cascaded in glossy waves, and her heels clicked sharply against the hardwood floors. At first, she was polite, sickeningly polite. "Linda, please, let me get your tea," she would say, her smile bright but her eyes already scanning her phone. "You're like a second mom to me." Her perfume lingered in the air long after she left a room, but so did the faint sting of her words. Subtle remarks that seemed harmless until they cut deep. "Oh, Linda, you wouldn't understand, it's more of a younger generation thing." Or, "Maybe you shouldn't eat so much bread. At your age, carbs are risky." She said it sweetly, as if out of concern, but I felt the edge beneath the sugar. Ethan, my boy, 38 now, tall, with sandy brown hair and those gentle green eyes that used to promise safety. As a child, he would clutch my hand tightly and whisper, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll always take care of you." Those words had carried me through countless lonely nights after my husband's death. But now, since Tiffany came into his life, they lingered only as echoes. He doesn't laugh as often anymore. He no longer sits at the kitchen table for lady-night cocoa or stories about his childhood. When Tiffany is around, his shoulders tighten, his eyes avoid mine, and he lets her voice fill the silence that used to belong to us. One evening stands out. I was clearing the plates after dinner, the clink of silverware loud in the uneasy quiet. Tiffany leaned toward Ethan, her voice sharp though pitched low. "She should be grateful we let her stay here rento-free." My hand faltered, the fork slipping and nearly clattering onto the floor. My chest ached, but I said nothing. I turned back to the sink, letting the hot water sting my hands. hoping the rising steam would blur the tears before they betrayed me. Another time, I woke early to find Tiffany already in the kitchen, scrolling on her phone while sipping coffee. I offered a smile, asking if she wanted pancakes. Without looking up, she replied, "No, thanks. We're not really into heavy breakfasts, well, at least Ethan isn't. Maybe you should stick to oatmeal, Linda." Her tone was casual, dismissive, but the implication that I was old, outdated, a burden hung heavy in the air. Despite it all, I kept giving, babysitting their little boy so they could enjoy date nights, using my modest pension to cover grocery bills when theirs ran high, staying up late hemming Ethan's shirts for his job interviews, my needle moving carefully under the dim glow of the kitchen lamp. Each sacrifice was a silent prayer that one day they would see how much I loved them. But little by little, the warmth in the house faded. Tiffany's smiles grew thinner, her eyes colder. Ethan's silence became heavier than words. I began to feel invisible, as though I had become a ghost, wandering the very halls I helped keep standing. I told myself I was imagining it, that if I just tried harder, things would get better. So I cooked more, helped more, gave more, but deep down, I felt the ground shifting beneath me, a storm gathering just out of sight. I didn't know it then, but Tiffany wasn't just eroding my dignity piece by piece. She was preparing to take something far greater. And soon, the illusion of family I had clung to for so long would shatter beyond repair. "Linda, you're such a lifesaver," Tiffany said one crisp autumn morning, her voice dripping with sugar. She took the packed lunch I'd prepared, leaned in to brush my cheek with a kiss, and returned to scrolling through her phone. The heavy floral perfume she wore filled the kitchen, lingering even after she left. "I don't know what we'd do without you." For a moment, my chest warmed. But then, I saw her eyes cold, calculating, hidden behind that smile. Ethan stood by the door, tie slightly crooked, his sandy hair neatly combed. He gave me a faint smile, not meeting my eyes, and slipped out with his briefcase. No thank you, no goodbye, just silence, and the soft click of the door. I stood there, hands damp from rinsing breakfast plates, whispering, "They're young, they need me, this is love." That afternoon, I trudged home from the grocery store, plastic bags cutting into my fingers. The autumn wind tugged at my cardigan, scattering brittle leaves along the path. Tiffany stood on the porch, laughing into her phone, her polished nails gleaming in the sunlight. I struggled up the steps, my arms trembling from the weight. She didn't move to help. Instead, she tilted her head back, giggling softly. "Oh, don't worry," she said into the phone, her voice sharp despite the sweetness. "She'll pay. She always does. Honestly, it's pathetic how easy it is." My foot caught the top step. The bag with milk and bread nearly toppled. She glanced at me briefly, plastering on a perfunctory smile before turning away. My chest tightened, but I forced a smile as I stepped past her, pretending I hadn't heard. Inside, I set the bags on the counter, my hands trembling. The loaf of bread slid slightly, the crust warm, fragrant. But in that moment, it felt heavy as stone. Later that evening, after dinner, I tucked my grandson into bed. His little chest rose and fell in steady rhythm. His lips parted in the innocence of dreams. I brushed a curl from his forehead and whispered, "Grandma's here. Always here." He stirred, sighing softly, before returning to sleep. My heart swelled with love, but when I turned away, the tears I had held back all day slipped silently down my cheeks. In the dim hallway light, I paused, wiping them quickly so no one would see. I didn't want my grandson to grow up thinking sadness lived in my eyes. Carrying a basket of freshly folded laundry, I passed the living room. The door was half closed, Tiffany's voice seeping out. "Oh, don't worry about it," she murmured into her phone, tone low but sharp. "It's almost funny. She thinks she's helping." I barely have to ask, she just offers. Pathetic, really. The basket slipped. A towel tumbled to the floor. My breath caught in my throat. I pressed a hand against my chest, the other gripping the basket handle until my knuckles turned white. Her laughter followed, short, cold, cruel. I backed away, leaving the towel on the floor. In my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, the quilt I'd sewn years ago clutched in my lap. The air felt thick, unbreathable. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stayed silent. The next morning, I baked bread, hoping the smell of warmth and home would draw us together. The golden crust glistened as I set it on the counter. Tiffany breezed into the kitchen in a silk blouse, her heels clicking sharply. She glanced at the loaf, lips curling into a faint smile. "Bread, Linda? At your age, carbs are dangerous. Maybe oatmeal would be better." Her voice was light, almost playful, but her words cut deeper than knives. She poured coffee, the scent of vanilla creamer filling the air, and walked out without another glance. I stood there, staring at the bread, my hands trembling. What I'd hoped would be a gift of love now sat untouched, a monument to my foolish hope. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the bread cooling untouched beside me. The dim light flickered above, casting long shadows on the walls. Through the doorway, I saw them on the couch. Tiffany, glass of wine in hand, her laughter bright and ringing. Ethan, his arm draped lazily across the back of the sofa, smiling faintly. Their voices blended, careless and light, drifting down the hall like shards of broken glass. I clasped my hands together, whispering, "Don't cry, Linda. Don't cause trouble. Don't make Ethan choose." But inside, I knew. This was only the beginning of the storm. I woke before dawn, the house still wrapped in silence. My slippers scuffed softly against the cold wooden floor as I shuffled into the kitchen. Today was Sunday. Tiffany had invited her boutique friends for dinner. I wanted everything to be perfect. Maybe, if they saw how hard I worked, they would finally look at me as more than just a shadow in this house. I rubbed butter under the turkey's skin, my arthritic fingers aching with every push. The onions stung my eyes as I chopped them, tears blurring the cutting board. I mixed the stuffing with careful precision, pressing down with hands that trembled from age and weariness. By the time the bird slid into the oven, my back was already screaming. Still, I polished every fork and knife until they gleamed, ironed the tablecloth, and arranged daisies in the old vase from the attic. By afternoon, the house smelled of roasted turkey, sweet potatoes caramelizing in brown sugar, and apple pie cooling on the counter, its crust dusted with sugar crystals. My hair clung damply to my forehead, my apron smeared with flour. But in my heart, hope whispered, "This will make them smile. This will make them see me." When the front door opened, Tiffany's laughter echoed down the hall before she appeared in her red silk dress. Her heels clicked confidently across the hardwood floor. Her friends followed, carrying handbags that looked more expensive than my entire wardrobe. "Tiffany, you look radiant. That dress, oh my goodness, stunning." Tiffany glowed under their praise. Then her eyes landed on me. "Linda, could you take the coats and find a place for them?" she said sweetly without meeting my eyes. "Of course," I murmured, gathering the heavy stack of coats as they trailed after her into the dining room. The chandelier lit the table like a stage, silverware gleaming, flowers bright against the white cloth. My heart swelled when a guest gasped, "This looks incredible." I smiled, my voice gentle. "Thank you." Oh, it's just a recipe I gave her," Tiffany cut in smoothly, flashing her dazzling smile. "Linda's wonderful at following directions. She has such dependable hands." Polite laughter trickled around the table. My cheeks burned. I lowered my gaze, pretending to adjust the napkin in my lap. As I leaned over to pour water, Tiffany's voice rang sharp. "Careful, Linda. This tablecloth was expensive." We wouldn't want to spill, would we? The guests chuckled. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, but his lips stayed sealed. A kind-of-faced woman with pearls turned to me, smiling warmly. You must be proud, Linda. Ethan is such a fine young man. You raised him well. The words filled me with warmth. At last, someone noticed. My eyes stung with tears as I whispered, Thank you, Oh, Ethan's success? Tiffany's laugh chimed, her manicured hand resting on Ethan's arm. It's really thanks to the opportunities we created together after we married. We've built everything as a team. The woman blinked, then nodded politely. My words dried in my throat, fading into the clinking of glasses. Later, I carried the apple pie with trembling hands. I had used the last of my cinnamon to make it perfect. This is heavenly. A guest sighed after a bite. My heart fluttered. I began softly. That's my grandmother's recipe. Tiffany interrupted smoothly, her laughter ringing. Linda just follows instructions so well. Don't you, Linda? All eyes turned to me. My throat closed. I forced a nod, whispering, Yes. I just followed instructions. Polite laughter again. Tiffany lifted her wineglass, her diamond bracelet glittering under the chandelier. Ethan's eyes stayed on his plate. Then Tiffany clapped her hands lightly, her smile as bright as the chandelier. Linda, why don't you start clearing the plates while we enjoy some more wine? You're just so efficient at it. The room went silent for half a beat. I froze, the fork slipping slightly from my fingers. My chest ached as I stood, gathering plates while Tiffany leaned back in her chair, sipping her wine like a queen. The guests murmured softly, pretending not to notice, their eyes sliding away as if my humiliation might be contagious. One of the men chuckled nervously. You've got quite the helper here, Tiffany. She's lucky we let her stay, Tiffany replied lightly, her eyes glinting. Otherwise, where would she go? The laughter that followed was quiet but sharp as glass. My breath caught, the plates clattering faintly as I carried them away. In the kitchen, I stood at the sink, hot water rushing over my trembling hands, the sound of their laughter drifting in from the dining room. Tears slid silently down my cheeks, mixing with the steam. Don't cry, Linda. Not here, not now. But inside, I knew something had broken so deeply it could never be the same again. The invitation had been left on the counter a week ago, slipped there as if it were an afterthought. Tiffany's voice had been airy, her smile perfectly painted as she said, just a little luncheon with Ethan's colleagues and their wives. Nothing formal. You'll come, of course. It'll be good for you to get out. For days, I stared at that invitation, wondering what I would wear. My wardrobe, worn thin from years of use, offered little. In the end, I chose my pale blue dress, one I had sewn long ago for Easter Sunday. The fabric had faded and the seams had loosened, but it was the nicest thing I owned. That morning, I ironed it carefully, pressing each wrinkle with trembling hands, whispering to myself that it would be enough. I even polished my old shoes until the scuffs dulled slightly. When we arrived at the upscale restaurant, my stomach clenched. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, the soft clink of silverware blending with the low murmur of laughter and conversation. Tiffany glided inside in a sleek black dress that hugged her figure perfectly, her heels clicking with authority. Her arm looped through Ethan's, her diamond bracelet sparkling with each movement. She belonged here. I felt like a shadow trailing behind. We were led to a long table draped in crisp white linen, every place setting gleaming with polished silver and crystal glasses. Tiffany immediately claimed the center seat, her voice carrying brightly as she greeted everyone. Ethan took the chair beside her, his smile polite, reserved. I slipped into the seat at the far edge, folding my hands in my lap, hoping no one noticed how out of place I was. The food came, steaming and fragrant, I sat quietly, listening to the laughter ripple around the table. Then, a kind-faced woman across from me leaned forward, her pearls catching the light. "Linda," she said warmly, "do you still enjoy baking? Ethan once told us you made the most wonderful pies." My chest tightened with sudden joy. At last, a moment to be seen. I smiled, feeling my eyes sting. "Oh, yes. Just last week, I baked." Tiffany's laugh cut through my words like a blade. "She makes the simplest recipes sound special, doesn't she?" I gave her my grandmother's pie recipe, and now she's practically famous in the family for it. Laughter spread across the table. My smile faltered, my unfinished sentence dissolving into the noise. A few minutes later, as the waiter poured wine, a gentleman turned to Ethan. "Tell us, Ethan, what was it like growing up? You've done so well for yourself." Ethan hesitated, his eyes flicking briefly toward me. My heart swelled, waiting for his words. But Tiffany leaned in, her manicured hand brushing his sleeve, her voice smooth as silk. "Oh, his mother did her best," she said sweetly, her eyes darting to me, sharp behind the smile. "But really, Ethan didn't thrive until we built our life together. That's when he truly found his footing." The table murmured agreement, glasses clinking in a toast. My throat tightened. I reached for my water glass, but my hand trembled, and a small splash landed on the pristine white cloth. "Oh, Linda," Tiffany exclaimed, her voice rising above the chatter. "So clumsy. This tablecloth is rented, you know." The laughter wasn't cruel, but it stung like a lash all the same. My cheeks burned, and I fumbled with a napkin, whispering, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Ethan's eyes stayed on his plate. Tiffany patted my hand with a mock sweetness. "It's fine, Linda. Really, we're just glad you could come. It's good for you to get out, isn't it?" The words dripped with condescension, her smile cutting as glass. More polite chuckles followed. When dessert arrived, I barely tasted it. The chandelier above seemed brighter, harsher. The room felt smaller, heavier. I sat in my faded blue dress, shrinking further into myself with each laugh, each stolen glance. At last, when the luncheon ended and we rose to leave, Tiffany leaned close to one of her friends, her voice light, almost playful. "She tries, bless her heart. But honestly, can you imagine her anywhere else? She's lucky we keep her." The words hit me like a blow to the chest. My breath caught, my vision blurred. I looked to Ethan, desperate for one word, any word in my defense. But he adjusted his jacket, his lips pressed tightly, his eyes avoiding mine. The ride home was silent. Tiffany chatted with Ethan in the front seat, her laughter ringing through the car. I sat in the back, staring out the window as the city blurred past. My hands twisted in my lap, knuckles white. Every word from that luncheon echoed inside me, each one cutting deeper. When we reached home, Tiffany swept inside with the grace of a queen returning to her castle. Ethan followed, loosening his tie. I lingered at the doorway, staring at my reflection in the glass panel, a tired old woman in a faded dress, hair coming loose from its pins. From the living room, Tiffany's laughter rose again, Ethan's voice low beside hers. I slipped quietly into the kitchen, turning on the tap. Warm water poured over my trembling hands as I stood at the sink, tears finally spilling freely. "Don't cry, Linda. Not here. Not now." But deep inside, I knew. Something inside me had broken beyond repair. The morning after the luncheon, the house was so still, it almost hurt. Tiffany and Ethan had already left for work. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold, the porcelain heavy in my hands. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, scattering across the faded tablecloth. Dust motes floated lazily in the beam of light, tiny ghosts reminding me of the years that had slipped by. I stared at my reflection in the window. The woman who looked back at me seemed older than I remembered. Tired eyes ringed with shadows, hair streaked with gray escaping its pins, shoulders curved inward. I whispered into the silence, "Is this all I am now?" The sudden clatter of the mail slot broke my trance. Slowly, joints aching, I pushed back my chair and shuffled to the door. The pile on the mat was the same as always: bills, advertisements, catalogs. But at the bottom, tucked between glossy envelopes, was one small letter. The paper had yellowed, and the handwriting across the front made my breath catch in my throat. It was his. My husband's. My hands shook as I tore it open. The ink was faded, the paper thin, but the words were steady, familiar. "My dearest Linda, if you're reading this, then I didn't get the chance to tell you in person. I wanted to make sure you'd be taken care of. There's a savings account in your name at the bank downtown. I put aside every spare penny I could. It's not much, but I hope it helps you live freely, without fear or worry. Please remember you deserve a life of dignity and peace." Tears spilled onto the page, blurring the words. I pressed the letter to my chest, the faint scent of old paper rising like a whisper of him. Memories swirled. The way he used to hold my hand during evening walks, his laughter when he teased me about burning toast, his quiet promise one night as we sat under the porch light. "No matter what happens, I'll always make sure you're safe." I had thought those words died with him. But here they were, alive in his handwriting. That afternoon, I gathered my courage and walked to the old bank downtown. The building looked nearly the same as the last time we had visited together, its stone columns weathered but strong. My heart pounded as I slid the account number to the clerk. She typed quickly, then looked up with a smile. "Mrs. Williams? Yes, the account is active. And—" She hesitated, then scribbled a number onto a slip of paper, sliding it across the counter. I picked it up with trembling fingers. My eyes widened. The balance was far more than I had ever expected. Enough to pay off debts. Enough to start over. Enough to remind me that I wasn't helpless. As I stepped outside, the late afternoon sun warmed my face. The breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a shadow. I felt alive. I walked into a little cafe I hadn't visited in decades, the bell over the door chiming softly. The barista smiled, and I ordered a simple lunch: tomato soup and a sandwich. I sat near the window, savoring each bite as though it were a feast. Around me, people laughed. Children pressed their noses to the glass. A couple held hands across the table. For once, I didn't feel invisible. When I finished, I did something I hadn't done in years. I bought myself a small scarf from the boutique next door, a soft one, patterned with pale flowers. It wasn't expensive, but as I draped it around my shoulders, I felt a weight lift. It was mine, chosen for me, not handed down, not borrowed. That evening, back in my room, I unfolded the letter again. My husband's words glowed under the lamplight, soft and steady. I traced the lines with my fingertips, a smile breaking through my tears. "I'll be okay," I whispered into the quiet. "I'll be more than okay." But as I blew out the lamp and lay in the stillness, a thought burned inside me, brighter than any candle. They thought I was powerless. They thought I had nothing left. But they were wrong. So very wrong. The next few days, I moved through the house quietly, almost invisibly, as I always had. But inside me, something had shifted. Tiffany's sharp words, Ethan's silence, all the laughter at my expense, they no longer pierced me the same way. Because I knew something they didn't. I had power now. Real power. One evening, while Tiffany and Ethan were out at a dinner party, I sat at the kitchen table with my husband's letter spread out in front of me. The scarf I had bought rested softly around my shoulders, its fabric a gentle reminder that I was no longer the woman they thought I was. I opened my old notebook, the one I used to jot recipes and grocery lists. This time, I filled its pages with plans. I listed the people Tiffany often invited over, the charities she boasted about supporting, the shops where she demanded discounts for publicity. I remembered the jewelry she flaunted, the designer clothes she bragged about. Every detail she had carelessly let slip, I wrote down. The next day, I walked downtown to a lawyer's office I'd passed countless times before but never dared to enter. The brass letters on the door gleamed. Henderson and Associates. My hands trembled as I explained why I was there. The young lawyer listened carefully as I spoke of my husband's account and the years of being sidelined. He smiled kindly. "Mrs. Williams, with this account and the assets your husband left, you have more options than you realize. You don't need to live under anyone's thumb." The words felt like a door swinging open. I left the office with a stack of papers, my steps lighter than they had been in years. That weekend, Tiffany hosted another gathering at the house. The dining room glowed with laughter and wine. I moved among the guests, quiet as always, refilling glasses, setting plates. But this time, I wasn't shrinking. I was watching, listening. One woman gushed about a charity gala Tiffany was planning. "She's just so generous, isn't she?" I smiled politely, folding a napkin. Inside, I noted the name of the gala. Tiffany loved to boast about her generosity, but I had seen the receipts. I knew she often pocketed more than she gave. Later, when Tiffany excused herself to take a phone call, I slipped quietly into her study. My hands didn't shake this time as I copied down the details from the bills and credit statements she left scattered on her desk. Jewelry purchases, luxury vacations, charges that didn't match the image she projected to her friends. As I tucked the papers back exactly where I had found them, I caught my reflection in the polished glass of a cabinet. For the first time in years, I didn't see a beaten-down woman. I saw someone awake, someone ready. That night, lying in bed, I whispered into the darkness, "You thought I was powerless. You thought I had nothing. But soon, everyone will know the truth." And as I drifted into sleep, I felt the first stirrings of something I had thought long gone. Hope mixed with strength. The week after the country club luncheon, the house felt different. Tiffany's laughter was still there, but brittle, like glass on the verge of breaking. She spent hours on the phone, insisting to anyone who would listen that the rumors about her charity were nothing but malicious lies. I went about my usual chores, but inside, I felt lighter. I could see it happening already, the cracks spreading through Tiffany's carefully painted mask. On Saturday evening, Tiffany held another dinner party. She called it intimate and exclusive, though I noticed fewer cars pulling into the driveway. Some of her so-called closest friends had suddenly discovered they were too busy to attend. The dining room glittered with candlelight, silverware gleaming on the tablecloth. Tiffany floated around in a pale silk gown, her diamond bracelet flashing with every gesture. Ethan followed at her side, smiling politely, though I noticed his jaw tight every time someone mentioned the luncheon. During the main course, Tiffany raised her glass, her smile practiced and perfect. "This gala," she said warmly, "will be the event of the year. Ethan and I are so proud to give back. We'll raise more money than ever before." Polite applause scattered around the table, but I saw eyes flicking to one another. Then a woman with pearl earrings leaned forward, her tone sweet but edged with steel. "Tiffany, forgive me, but I must ask, how do you manage such generous donations while also keeping up such an exquisite lifestyle?" The air in the room tightened. Tiffany froze, then let out a high laugh. "Oh, you know me, always juggling a dozen things. But for the greater good, it's worth every bit of effort." The woman smiled politely, but her gaze stayed cold. Across from her, Ethan shifted in his seat, his fork scraping loudly against the plate. He wouldn't meet her eyes. A few moments later, one of the wealthiest couples at the table set down their glasses. The husband cleared his throat. "Tiffany, about your gala," he began. I think we'll have to decline this year. We've decided to support a different organization." The room went utterly still. Tiffany's smile froze, her knuckles white on her napkin. "Oh, well," she said, voice thin, "of course. That's your choice." Her laugh was too quick, too brittle. I saw the flicker in Ethan's eyes as he reached for her hand under the table, more to steady her than to support her. By dessert, another couple excused themselves early. As they left, the wife glanced back at me. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and in that look, I read the truth. They knew Tiffany's mask was slipping. After the guests were gone, Tiffany stormed upstairs. I followed quietly with the empty trays and paused near the study. Through the crack of the door, I heard her voice no longer honeyed, but sharp and frantic. "I told you not to call me here. If anyone finds out where the money really went, I'll be ruined. Do you understand? Ruined." I pressed a hand to my chest to steady the rush of satisfaction. She was unraveling. Later, she burst into the kitchen, her heels striking the tile like gunfire. "Someone is trying to destroy me," she hissed. "People are whispering, questioning. Did you hear them?" I looked up slowly, meeting her glare with calm. "Oh, Tiffany, people always talk, but the truth always finds its way out." Her eyes narrowed, suspicion flashing for the briefest moment before she waved me off. "You wouldn't understand." She grabbed her purse and stormed upstairs, slamming the door. When the house finally settled, I opened my old notebook. I wrote down every detail: the pearl-eared woman's question, the wealthy couple declining her gala, Tiffany's panicked phone call. Then I added a line. Words my husband once whispered as we sat under the porch light years ago. "Linda, don't ever let anyone convince you that you don't matter. The truth will always stand taller than the lies." Beneath it, I wrote, "Her friends are beginning to doubt." Tonight, 2 turned away. Next time, more will follow. Even Ethan feels the shift. And soon, the whole world will see. Closing the notebook, I touched the scarf at my shoulders. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a burden in this house. I felt like the one holding the reins. The house had grown tense in the days after the dinner party. Tiffany's laughter still echoed down the halls, but it no longer rang clear. It was brittle, sharp, and too quick, as if she could drown out the whispers clawing at her reputation. Ethan was quieter still, pacing the study late into the night, leaving Tiffany to stalk the house like a restless shadow. One afternoon, I lingered by the sitting room while dusting, the feather duster motionless in my hand as I caught Tiffany's sharp voice through the half-open study door. "I don't care how you do it. Just bury the story. I will not be humiliated. Do you understand? I will not." Her voice cracked, the sound of a woman cornered. The next morning, the newspaper thudded onto the porch. I carried it inside, setting my coffee down as I unfolded it. Bold letters screamed across the front page. Tiffany Williams. Charity funds under scrutiny. The article was merciless, lined with tax records and quotes from anonymous sources. Each detail was a thread pulling apart Tiffany's carefully woven image. Luxury retreats, billed as charity conferences. Jewelry purchased days before a donation. And questions. So many questions about where the money had truly gone. By mid-afternoon, Tiffany's phone buzzed relentlessly. I saw the messages flashing on her screen as she slammed it down onto the marble counter. "Tell me this isn't true. We trusted you, Tiffany." Canceling my gala attendance. Her manicured hand shook as she poured herself a glass of wine at noon. On Sunday, she staged a brunch in the garden. She thought sunlight, porcelain, and flowers could wash away the shadows. The linen tablecloths gleamed, the crystal vases sparkled, and Tiffany appeared in a lemon-yellow dress, her diamonds catching the morning light. But I noticed the strain around her eyes, the way her smile wavered at the edges. "Rumors come and go," she said brightly, lifting her glass. "But true success shines above jealousy. Ethan and I will not be torn down." For a moment, Polite laughter circled the table. Then Mrs. Caldwell, her dearest friend of 2 decades, folded the newspaper on her lap and spoke gently but firmly. Tiffany, people aren't jealous. They're concerned. Transparency would silence this faster than denial. The air shifted. A man at the far end cleared his throat. She's right. The church committee is already asking about the missing funds. They were counting on your support. Tiffany's hand froze around her glass, knuckles whitening. Her smile strained. We've always given generously, you know that. Another woman leaned forward, her voice like a velvet knife. Tiffany, the Children's Hospital fundraiser last month, you canceled it. We were told the money had already been allocated. Where did it go? The silence was heavy. Tiffany's lips parted, but no words came. Ethan leaned in, his voice low and tight. There must be a reasonable explanation. Oh, but even as he said it, his eyes avoided hers. I saw the ripple across the table, the recognition that even Ethan was no longer fully standing at her side. A chair scraped against the patio stones as one of the wealthiest couples stood. Mr. Whitmore's voice was cool as winter steel. We appreciate the brunch, Tiffany, but we'll be withdrawing from the gala. We prefer our support go where it's truly needed. His wife glanced briefly at Tiffany, then at me. Our eyes met, and in that split second, she gave the faintest nod before walking away. The moment cracked Tiffany's composure. Her face flushed crimson, her laugh pitched too high. Desperate. Well, of course. Everyone must follow their heart. The brunch limped on, but the damage was done. Half an hour later, another guest excused herself early, claiming a sudden headache. Chairs scraped, voices murmured. The garden that had once been Tiffany's stage now echoed with doubt. And then, just as the last plates were being cleared, a voice called from the front gate. Mrs. Williams, a word, please. We all turned. A young reporter, notebook in hand, stood outside the iron fence. Cameras flashed behind him. Mrs. Williams, how do you respond to the allegations of misused funds? Do you deny the tax discrepancies? Tiffany froze, her smile shattering. This is private property. Get out, she snapped, her voice cracking. Ethan half rose, muttering, We'll speak with our attorney, but his face was pale. I lowered my gaze to the silver tray in my hands, hiding the flicker of a smile. The truth had stepped right up to her gate. That evening, Tiffany stormed through the house, her heels like gunfire on the marble floors. She slammed her study door so hard the chandelier rattled. Through the crack, I heard her voice frantic, breaking. They're leaving me, Caldwell, the Whitmores. If this continues, I'll lose everything. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, under the soft glow of the lamp, and opened my old notebook. I recorded every detail, the questions at brunch, the Whitmores' icy words, the flash of cameras at the gate. Then, with a steady hand, I wrote beneath it, Her walls are collapsing. Today, she lost Caldwell and the Whitmores. Tomorrow, the community. Even Ethan feels the tide turning. Soon, her palace of lies will fall, and I will be there. Not as her servant, but as the witness to her ruin. I closed the notebook slowly, resting my hand on the scarf draped over my shoulders. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel invisible. I felt inevitable. The storm had broken wide open. Each day, the house seemed smaller, suffocating under the weight of whispers and flashing cameras. Neighbors no longer waved. They stood in clusters at the end of their driveways, whispering as the reporters gathered outside the gates. Children pointed, their mothers pulling them back, their eyes fixed on the grand house that had become a spectacle. One morning, I stepped out to fetch the mail and nearly tripped over a stack of newspapers tossed on the porch. All of them carried Tiffany's face on the cover, her painted smile now frozen under headlines about fraud and betrayal. Among the letters were 3 envelopes stamped with bold red letters. Final notice. Inside, Tiffany paced the marble floor, her silk robe trailing like a flag of surrender. She barked into her phone, voice hoarse from screaming. I will not go down like this. Do you hear me? I built this life. I made them respect us. That evening, Ethan came home late. His tie hung loose, his face pale. He sank into the armchair across from me. Mom, he whispered, his voice breaking. Tell me it isn't true. Tell me she didn't use the charity money. I folded the laundry slowly, then met his eyes. You already know the truth, Ethan. His hands trembled as he rubbed his temples. She'll destroy me if I walk away. But if I stay... He trailed off, staring into the dark corner of the room. The following afternoon, Tiffany gathered what remained of her poise. She called a press conference in the front yard, determined to set the record straight. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing like lightning. I stood at the upstairs window, the curtain barely drawn, watching. Ladies and gentlemen, Tiffany began, her voice shaky beneath the microphone's echo. These accusations are lies, spread by jealous people who want to see me fail. A reporter shouted, Mrs. Williams, tax documents prove funds were missing. Will you open your accounts for review? Tiffany's smile twitched. That is irrelevant. The money was used appropriately. Another voice cut through the chaos. The Children's Hospital just confirmed they never received your promised donation. How do you explain that? Her composure crumbled. She snapped, her voice shrill. This is harassment. I won't stand here and be humiliated. The footage aired that night. Across the bottom of the screen, a breaking headline scrolled, Major donor withdraws support from Tiffany Williams. The donor, a long-standing pillar of the community, announced live that they would redirect their funds to causes of integrity. The phone rang all evening, but Tiffany didn't answer. Ethan slammed the remote onto the coffee table, his face gray. Do you see what you've done? He shouted. Later, I heard them in the study. Ethan's voice was sharp, angrier than I had heard in years. You lied to me, Tiffany. The whole town is laughing at us. You've ruined everything. Her reply was desperate, almost a scream. I did it for us, Ethan. Do you think anyone respects nobodies? I made us matter. The fight ended with a slam of the door. Ethan stormed out, his car tearing down the driveway into the night. He didn't come back until morning. At midnight, the reporters were still outside, their camera flashes casting eerie bursts of light across the curtains. I quietly slipped into the hallway and pulled open one of the side windows, just enough for the microphones to catch Tiffany's next outburst. Her shrill voice carried into the night air. They'll regret crossing me. All of them will regret it. I closed the window silently, my lips curling into the faintest smile. Later, under the glow of the kitchen lamp, I opened my notebook. My pen scratched steadily across the page. The walls are falling. The neighbors whisper. The papers shout. Ethan no longer defends her. Tonight, a major donor walked away. Tomorrow, the rest will follow. She believes she built this life for respect. But a palace built on lies will always crumble. I paused, remembering my husband's voice on a warm summer evening long ago. Linda, when the truth finally speaks, lies scatter like leaves in the wind. I added beneath it, soon she will stand alone at the ruins of her own making. And I will be there not as her servant, but as the keeper of the truth. I closed the book and looked at the scarf around my shoulders, feeling its weight like a promise. Outside, the cameras still flashed, but inside, I felt calm. For the first time in years, I was no longer a shadow. I was the storm. By the end of the month, the Williams estate no longer felt like a palace. It felt like a cage. Reporters still crowded the gates, their cameras flashing each time Tiffany dared to draw back the curtains. Bills piled on the counter, thick envelopes from the tax office mixed with formal notices from creditors. Tiffany had begun tearing them open with shaking hands, her silk nails snapping against the glue. One evening, I heard her in the study, her voice shrill over the phone. I can't pay that now. Do you understand? The accounts are frozen. It's temporary. I'll get it back. I always do. But her voice cracked. I knew she had no way out. Later that week, the news broke wide. Tiffany Williams removed from gala committee amid investigation. The headline scrolled across every television screen in town. I sat silently on the couch while Tiffany stormed around the living room, her makeup streaked, her eyes wide with fury. They can't do this to me. I am the gala. Ethan, standing by the window, didn't answer. When she turned to him, desperate, he finally spoke, his voice cold. No, Tiffany. You were. Not anymore. Her mouth fell open, but no words came. For the first time, Ethan didn't look at her, he looked at the floor, as if ashamed. The next morning, the mail brought worse. Their largest bank had frozen all accounts. Jewelry stores called, demanding payments. Even the gardener refused to continue service without cash up front. The once pristine estate began to wilt, weeds creeping along the edges of the lawn. That evening, Ethan came home late again. He carried no briefcase, only exhaustion. Tiffany rushed to him, clutching his arm. You believe me, don't you? Say you do. We can fight this together. But Ethan gently pulled his arm away. I don't know who you are anymore. His voice was soft, but final. Tiffany froze, her painted smile trembling. For the first time, I saw real tears spill down her face. That night, as the house grew silent, I passed by the study and found Tiffany slumped over the desk. The newspaper spread before her. The headline read, Major sponsors abandon Tiffany Williams. Her mascara stained the paper. She whispered, hoarsely, to no one in particular, I only wanted them to respect me. I closed the door quietly and walked back to the kitchen. Under the glow of the lamp, I opened my notebook. My pen moved slowly but firmly. It is done. The gala has cast her out. The banks have closed their doors. Ethan no longer stands beside her. And still, she cannot see that respect built on lies was never respect at all. I paused, remembering the night my husband and I first moved into our small home, years before wealth and grandeur touched our lives. He had taken my hand and said, Linda, love and honesty are worth more than all the jewels in the world. Without them, the jewels turn to dust. I added beneath it, now the jewels have turned to dust. And the dust is all she has left. I closed the book, pressing it gently to my chest. Outside, the cameras still flashed, but inside, I felt peace. Tiffany's empire had crumbled not by my hand, but by the truth she had buried. By autumn, the Williams estate was no longer a fortress of glittering pride. The hedges had grown wild, the marble steps stained with fallen leaves. The reporters had mostly gone now, moving on to newer scandals. What remained was silence. Tiffany rarely left her room. I would hear her pacing some nights, her voice broken and muffled as she spoke into the phone. But fewer and fewer calls came. Friends who once filled these halls with laughter had vanished. Even Mrs. Caldwell, who once stood beside her through everything, no longer answered her calls. Ethan came to me one evening, standing in the kitchen doorway. He looked older, worn. Mom, he said quietly, I'm moving out. I can't do this anymore. I've filed for separation. I felt a pang in my chest, both sorrow and relief. Do what you must, Ethan. I only hope you'll find peace. His eyes shone with regret. You were right, Mom, about everything. I wish I had listened sooner. When he left the next morning, Tiffany screamed from the top of the stairs, begging, cursing, promising. But Ethan didn't look back. The door shut, and she was left alone in her echoing house. I continued my days quietly. I tended the small garden patch behind the kitchen, pulling weeds, planting late-blooming flowers. The world beyond the gates seemed calmer now. Neighbors, once cold, began to nod again when I passed. Some even stopped to chat. offering warm smiles that reminded me of simpler times. One evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The sun dipped behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. I opened my notebook one last time and wrote, "Justice is not always loud. Sometimes it is the quiet undoing of lies, the steady rise of truth. Tiffany's empire has fallen. Ethan has broken free. And I, who once felt invisible, have found myself again." I closed the book and let the cool air wash over me. For the first time in years, I felt light, free. Later that night, I passed Tiffany's room. The door was ajar. She sat slumped by the window, staring into the dark yard, her hair unkempt, her robe hanging loose. Her once proud face was pale, lined with weariness. She looked at me, her voice hoarse. "Do you hate me, Linda?" I paused in the doorway, the scarf around my shoulders soft against my skin. "No, Tiffany, I don't hate you." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't step closer. "Then why?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why did you let this happen?" I met her gaze, steady but calm, because the truth was always stronger than us both. She looked away, shoulders shaking silently. I left her there, the sound of her muffled sobs trailing into the night. In my own room, I lay down and pulled the quilt up around me. For the first time in decades, I slept peacefully, the house no longer heavy with lies. They say storms reveal more than they destroy. I believe that now. For years, I lived in the shadows, convinced I was nothing more than a burden in my own son's house. I let cruel words define me, let arrogance weigh on my shoulders like chains. I told myself silence was safer than truth. But I was wrong. This storm, loud and merciless, did not ruin me. It freed me. It showed me that lies, no matter how carefully built, cannot stand against the steady weight of truth. Tiffany thought respect came from wealth, from diamonds, from the power of appearances. But true respect cannot be bought. It is earned through kindness, honesty, and love, the very things she dismissed as weakness. I do not rejoice in her ruin. That is not the kind of woman I am. But I do feel peace knowing the truth stood taller than her lies. If there is one lesson I hold close, it is this. Never let anyone tell you that your worth depends on what you own or how the world sees you. Your worth is in your heart, in the love you give, the truth you live, and the dignity you refuse to surrender. I am no longer invisible. Not because I won or proved someone wrong, but because I chose to stand with the truth. And that, I have learned, is enough. Thank you, dear friends, for staying with me through this story. If my journey touched your heart, if it reminded you of the quiet strength we all carry inside, I hope you will share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Your support means more than words. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Every click, every word of encouragement helps us bring more stories of truth, love, and healing to life. Until we meet again, may you walk with dignity, live in truth, and know that you are never invisible.